Hey everybody, welcome back to part 3 of our mega series. This is the midway point. We have 2 more episodes, and there's 2 more episodes before this, so make sure to go check them out if they're not. Of course, this is What If Confederates Won the Civil War. You should know this already, because I assume you read the title. But make sure to like and subscribe, comment down below what I should do next. And yeah, I hope you guys do enjoy this video, and make sure to have a good time. Now let's get into the history. We left off with 1914, with North America looking like this, with the US being defeated, but winning the Second Mexican-American War with the help of the Confederates. The Confederates legalizing slavery, what's that right word? Making slavery illegal, and Stonewall Jackson becoming the new president of, well, the Confederate States. This would lead to a huge war, as well as Europe looking like this. Now, this is a standard European map, but remember, last time, America didn't really get involved till the later years. This time, America is getting involved from the very start, and it's divided, which would lead to an even bigger war. And World War I would truly become World War, and not just European, Africa, and the Middle East. So, we're going to be swapping back from the European to the North American front, so stick with me here. The US would be the first one to invade. They would invade fast and hard, having a more experienced military and training. The Confederates' only front would be in Mexico and taking over Baja California. Meanwhile, the US would cut in to the western South and northern Canada, as well as West Virginia and West Maryland would start to as well. Meanwhile, Germany would quickly strike through Belgian territory and French territory as well as taking over Russia. And Romania would also start to fall more and more. Austria-Hungary would, of course, not take any land in Serbia, except for a tiny bit, but would lose land, would be the only Central Power member to do so, which would be quite horrible for their reputation. Most of the fronts would continue, but Mexico would drop out of the Central Powers and would start to fight another war. This would make a hard border, with a lot of the already territory that Mexico lost being kept by the Brits and the Confederates. Meanwhile, the Confederates would keep on losing ground. Though Michigan's finger would start losing ground, overall, the fronts would stay the same. As well as in Europe, the fronts would largely stay the same, with only a small difference here and there. The only major difference is Serbia taking more land and Germany taking more land. But trench warfare would start to really set in, and once again, World War I would become a war of the trenches, with not a lot of massive movements in the front, and just people holding on for dear life of trying to survive. Now, the US would pull off their first major offensive. After taking a lot of northern Canada, they would start to try and cut off the small insurgents in the Baja California by the Confederates, and would push deep into New Mexican Confederate territory, and as well as Missouri, trying to get an even border across the Missouri line, and Kentucky and Maryland would soon fall as well. Now, Italy would join the war, and Austria would fail at invading that as well, but with Bulgaria also entering the war, Serbia would start to fall more and more. Belgium would be left barely without any territory, and the Russian Revolution would start hitting home, and Russia would fall. Though this time, the Germans would push even more, and the British would be really missing those Canadian troops who are busy trying to preserve their independence. Meanwhile, Canada would almost be completely taken over. Well, the main part of Canada, that being, and Baja California would almost be retaken. The small push that the Confederates managed to push into Union lines would be quickly crumbling, and Stonewall Jackson, having no choice, would try and make a draft program. But with the increased population of the US, thanks to the abolishment of slavery, a lot of black men would start fighting for their homeland. Meanwhile, in Europe, Paris would be completely taken over. Battles in the streets would still rage on of local resistance and even the French army trying to make pushes, but this overall would be ineffective and terrible, with a lot more people dying than anything. And Germany would continue starting to win the war. Canada, meanwhile, would completely capitulate, and so it would just be the South that the US had to deal with. Taking most of the northern South would be quite easy, and now there would just be small fractured armies. With the US militarizing and just being resentment of the South, this would just be horrible, with the only land being in Mexico that they would take, which would be pretty much useless for the South. Canadian rebels would still resist, however. Meanwhile, in Europe, Greece would now join the war, and would be horribly pushed back by Bulgaria, as well as Serbia would start to fall with the additional Bulgarian forces. Romania would also fall, and only a small part of Austria-Hungary would still be left in foreign occupation, including Italy would start to fall. And I'm sorry if you guys can hear that, we need to put batteries in the smoke alarm, so sorry about that. But Germany would start winning the war, and France would be just destroyed. Now, there would kind of be a reverse invasion of Baja California. After the South lost that beachhead and trying to retreat, the US would see an opportunity and quickly take that, and now the South would lose pretty much any land it had taken, and the British could no longer support them, trying to keep France and the war in Europe alive. The Confederates' ranks would just start to fold on themselves. Though they would still hold strong and try to do their best, it would overall just be horrible. The Confederates, meanwhile, pulling their troops out of France and the British pulling their troops back in, would just be horrible and would crush France. This would probably be the last they could hold on. One more major offensive by the Germans and they would just fall. Meanwhile, England would prepare for some type of naval invasion, though the technology wouldn't be quite at that time yet. And the Irish now start rebelling, it would overall just be horrible for Britain. Meanwhile, the US, pulling up some old strategies that they had, would see that charging down the Mississippi River and trying to cut the South in two would be very effective. But they would have to get through the Southern military and Navy. But by cutting through the Mississippi and transporting their own ships through, now the Confederate military is across. The only thing keeping the Confederates alive would be destroyed in one major naval battle. Now, with the Confederates not being able to protect the British supply lines, Britain and her colonies would start to fall. Even with their mighty navy, they would only be second to the Confederates, and France, now losing all Confederate support, would just completely fall into shambles, as well as Italy losing its front in the Alps and now being on equal ground almost, would just destroy them, so they would be forced to surrender. Mexico wouldn't get any land as they capitulated early and surrendered, but meanwhile the US would lock down their supply routes and make the Missouri Compromise Line the official border for the majority of the South besides Virginia, as well as taking back West Virginia and Maryland and Missouri. This would be horrible for the South, and they would be resenting, but they'd still keep their Confederate colonies, as well as the Republic of the Yukon would become independent. Germany would take a lot of land from France and Belgium, but meanwhile Russia would lose a lot of their places, much as in our timeline, and Bulgaria would form Greater Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire would grow enough to get it another spur of life in its revival. Ireland and Scotland would as well become independent, but now there would be resentment and sort of hate for the Germans for taking these land. Hey everybody, thank you for watching this video. I switched mics midway through, so I hope that wasn't horrible for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you do enjoy the mega series. Since I'm recording these all in one go, I don't really know how it's getting received. Hopefully it's getting received well. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys do like it. Make sure to just subscribe, because that really helps the channel out. Thank you guys so much, and goodbye! Wow, what a great video! On the left, that's a video that I recently uploaded, and on the right, well, that's a video YouTube thinks you should watch. So you decide which to pick. Go on, choose. I'm not judging. Oh, you chose that one? Get out, Timmy.